Hi, I'm Daniel Smeaton, and this is my cultural plunge. For the cultural plunge, I interviewed my neighbour Winston. Just a bit of background information on Winston. Winston Piera is a Sri Lankan immigrant who is 74 years of age. He's also my neighbour and a great family friend. Winston moved to Australia with his wife in 1975 and is happy to live here for 43 years. He's lived in the same house with his wife for 38 of those years. He came to Australia with enough money for a fresh start and basic English to, as he put it, survive. Winston had a positive attitude to learn as you go mentality, which held him in good stead when it came to finding work and building a career. Winston worked a number of jobs when he arrived in Australia. His personal favourite was as a tram driver. Winston loves his footy and is an avid Hawthorn fan. First topic we discussed was what identity meant to Winston, and he summed it up best as identity is the fact of being who you are or what you are, and how you see yourself as a whole being, the sum of your parts. Winston said his identity had changed numerous times throughout his 74 years, and he believed it will continue to do so. Identity is different for every person, as every individual perception of their identity. Your identity is influenced by a number of factors such as, but not limited to, faith and religion, art, attitude, value, family, rituals, community, clothing, music, behaviour, customs and traditions, and community. Culture also goes hand in hand with identity, as they are both highly influenced by similar factors. They are also intertwined, as you need one to have the other. Without your culture, you can't truly understand who you are and what you are. I'm a believer in the idea that you need to get lost to be found. And in my life, I have done some travel, and it wasn't until I saw other countries' diverse cultures that I was able to come home and recognise, appreciate, and understand my own, and how that culture shaped my identity. To get a better understanding of Winston's culture, I asked him, what Sri Lankan traditions do you continue to celebrate, participate in, and follow now that you're in Australia? Winston said he still cooks some Sri Lankan delicacies such as spicy curry served with rice, and that he loves his tea, which is a common trait of Sri Lankan people. Winston also said that he loved his cricket and told me all about how he used to play it as a child growing up back at home in Sri Lanka. Winston believes in and follows the religion of Buddhism, but it hasn't really honoured the tradition as well as he should since he arriving in Australia, and he's also acknowledged that everyone is entitled to their own different beliefs. We then moved on to the discussion of racism. Racism can be defined as a preconception of superiority of one race over another, which often leads to discrimination and antagonisation. Racism is a big issue that occurs far too often in Australia. A quote by Winston that really struck a chord with me was, "We need to stop judging people by the colour of their skin, but the content of their character." And he is completely right. When asked about racism he had encountered over the years, Winston said he experienced quite a lot of it in the early years but had to ignore it, as now in this day and age racism isn't socially acceptable and it doesn't really occur to him anymore. He believed that times have changed and Australia has come a long way in improving equality and acceptance of diversity. Winston said that the way he handled it was by deciding to look past it and forget about it, as there are far worse things in the world than being mistreated for the colour of your skin. It takes a strong person to forgive and forget. We then discussed the concept of othering. Othering or to other is to perceive or treat people or a group of people differently to others because they are different and are not one of us. We both discussed how we have experienced and also participated in othering of people. I've developed the bad habit of judging the book by its cover and then othering it based on that one early judgment. So that's something I'm now trying to work on, both as a professional and as a person. As for racism, as Australia's population grows and more diversity is welcomed, we as a country need to stamp it out. I think the best way to do so is through education, translation, and embracing all diverse cultures that are within our incredible country. The best way to eradicate racism is by educating people that culture and diversity should be celebrated and not kept behind closed doors. Diversity is what makes Australia such a great place, and I say the more the merrier. I then asked Winston about his thoughts on the education system in Australia. This was hard for Winston to answer because he hadn't really experienced the education system in Australia, as he arrived in Australia and just got straight into working. So it was hard for him to discuss it and have an opinion about it. He also doesn't have any children, so he has never been involved in the education system of Australia. He did, however, say that it seems to be working because kids are finishing university, getting their degrees and getting the hard jobs. I made the decision to ask Winston to define equality and equity, as this is what we need to discuss anyway. So if he could give a basic understanding, we could then discuss how it worked in a school setting. Winston defined equality as giving every person the same equal opportunity, and equity as those that require extra assistance, the help they need, so that they can get the same equal opportunity that everybody receives. We then discussed how this would work in a classroom or school setting. Winston stated that equality in schools is giving every student the same equal opportunity to learn, and that equity in schools is catering to each student's individual needs to give them the same equal opportunity to learn. Equality in schools is important, as each student should be treated equally and given the same learning opportunities as one another. Equity in schools is how we level out the playing field for all our students, by assisting them with their individual needs to give them the same equal opportunity to learn as the other students who are better off. The best way to do so is to identify each student's strengths using the virtual backpack model, and then coming up with ways to capitalise on those strengths so that they can use them in their learning. It is vital that we as future educators understand how to create equality and equity in our classrooms and in the education system, so that all our future students get the same learning opportunities, as everybody is entitled to learn, and it is our job moving forward to give them the best chance to do so. After listening to my interview and writing down a report on what we discussed, I found that I got a lot of information out of Winston, but in hindsight, there's a lot more depth I wish I was able to dive into and discuss. I would have liked to have asked more questions about his upbringing in Sri Lanka, why he moved to Australia, and what keeps him here in Australia. What makes Australia home to him, and why he continues to stay here. I also would have liked to have gone into more depth about racism Winston has experienced and why he decided to move on and look past it. But unfortunately that didn't happen, so this is the best I can do with the information I received from the interview. I found it hard to ask about racism, as I've never experienced it, so I don't have the understanding of how it affects you. I also didn't really feel comfortable asking about it, as Winston briefly touched on it but quickly moved on, so I figured he didn't really feel comfortable going into too much depth about it. As racism is a very personal thing, so it's really hard to put into words so that I could understand and then comment on it, I guess. Racism is an uncomfortable topic, but it's something we need to discuss so that we can prevent it from continuing to happen in our country, and the best way to do it is through education. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my cultural plunge.